Here we go. And we are live with Century 21 Preferred Training. Today we're talking about notices to perform, demand to close escrow, and cancellation of the contract. So, question for you all, for the agents out there, when do you need a notice to perform? When do you need it? When do you use it? Somebody talk to me. Uh-oh, everybody fell asleep. Come back to the classroom. It's quiet. Okay. So you, of course, are familiar with your purchase agreement, right? So we're going to be using a notice to perform, demand to close escrow, any of those, in the fact that someone is not performing contractually based on what the RPA says. So what I've got is, I've got the screen here. We're going to share with you. We're going to walk through these documents together. So let me just pull this up really quickly. You should be able to see now our notice to perform, notice of buyer to perform. Just so that everyone is aware, there is a notice of a buyer to perform, a notice of a seller to perform, and then there is, of course, the demand to close escrow. So we're going to take our time. We're going to walk through all of these together this morning. All right. Who's ever actually had to use one of these? Anybody actually had the opportunity? I don't know if opportunity is actually the right word to say it, but has anyone ever actually used a notice to perform or demand to close escrow?
No.
No. All right. Well, maybe have you ever been sent a notice to perform? That's another question right there. All right. Yes. Yes. Lori says, we got some yeses over here. All right. If you've ever been sent one of these, you know, what do you tell your client? How do you explain that to them? So let's go ahead and get started. I believe my little cursor here should light this thing up for us, and you guys should be able to see as I draw on the screen this morning. As always, with any of our documents, we want to make sure that we fill them out correctly. All pieces of these documents. All right. So what we're talking about right now is the notice to perform for the buyer. In this top portion right here, where you see my little cursor is, you want to always put whatever that number is going to be. Okay. Whatever that number is going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever the case may be, you want to be filling in that space. All right. Never leave that portion blank. It says, in accordance with the terms of the, and then there are several boxes here. California Purchase Agreement. We've got the RPA, the Income Property Purchase Agreement, the Commercial Property Agreement, the Vacant Land Purchase Agreement. Make sure you're filling in the correct box. All right. Make sure you're filling in the correct box when you are filling out any of these documents here. And then, of course, if there's a different agreement there, whatever it is that you're using, there's a space provided for that. The date. Now, unfortunately, sometimes agents may be a little bit confused on what date goes here, right? This date is referencing back to the actual contract that you've mentioned here that you checked the box for. So the date of the purchase contract is the date that goes here, dated on, right? For the property known as property address goes there. You want to make sure that you have the buyer name here. You want to make sure that you have the seller's name here, right? Make sure everybody's information is properly explained or written out on this document. So, of course, when you spoke to your seller and you told them that basically the buyer has the control of the contract when you open escrow, the seller can only cancel if the buyer does not do two things. Now, they're right here on the screen. Who can help me with that? 2 ways that a seller can cancel, and what is that if the buyer does not perform on? What 2 ways are that? Well, I guess no one's going to read it for me. No one's going to type it into the chat box. We see right here on the screen, seller hereby gives buyer, I'm reading in the bold, seller hereby gives buyer notice as applicable, remove specified contingencies and take the specified contractual actions as follows. So there are two ways. This is two, that's two, they're all two. All right, there's two ways that a seller can cancel. If the buyer does not remove their contingencies within the time frames specified in the contract, or they do not perform contractually, a contractual action. So just looking through these, familiarizing you again with what those are. Again, we're talking about contingencies being removed in the specified time frame. We're talking about contractual actions being completed as well. All right, so that's what we're talking about in regards to how a seller can cancel a contract and move on. Right now, we're in a strong seller's market. Felipe mentioned that you don't want to get hung up with a buyer who can't perform. Make sure that you're doing your due diligence to be able to protect your sellers. All right, couple contingencies. You're familiar with these, I'm sure, but of course we'll read through them. There's the loan contingency. There's the appraisal contingency. Loan contingency, how long is that typically for? How long is the loan contingency typically for? 21 days, typically 21 days. No one's talking to me. I'm talking to myself. What's going on? Appraisal contingency, that's typically falls under the 17 days as well, with all of your other inspection contingencies. Disclosure reports, condominium or HOA docs, buyer's investigations, preliminary title report, and then sale of buyer's property, right? Have to remove their contingencies within the time frame specified in the contract. Typically, I know we're talking about it being 17 days for the majority of those, and the loan being 21 days. There's a space for you to put in if there's something different there. Check the appropriate boxes, and you guys are ready to rock and roll there to move forward with this document. Number two, the reasons that you can cancel if you represent the seller and the buyer has not performed as a contractual action. I always use it as an example, which is the first one right here, which is the initial deposit. I tell my clients all the time, if the buyer does not put in their initial deposit within how many days? How many days do they have to put in that initial deposit? 3 days. Absolutely. I think someone said 3 days. I thought that's what I heard. So 3 business days to put in that initial deposit, then you can move forward with this notice to perform. Their increased deposit data play, the form FVA, if you're familiar with that one, of course, as well in regards to FHA and VA loans, the loan application letter, wow, check that out right there, and the down payment verification. Of course, you remember that these are referencing those little check boxes on the RPA that states, you either have attached or you will provide that information within 3 days of your acceptance of the contract. So if they don't send you a pre-approval letter, if you accepted it without one, or if they don't send you proof of funds, if you accepted it without one, didn't recommend it, you can now at that point ask them to remove their consent, no, you can tell them to perform on that contractual obligation, or you can cancel. These are important for us to know to protect our sellers. There's, of course, a couple other ones down here. If they didn't return a lead disclosures, receipt for increased deposit, escrow, evidence, or of course a representative capacity. There's a couple other contractual obligations that they are to perform on. The majority of these, the major ones I should say, is going to be the initial deposit, of course, proof of funds, and their pre-approval. I would encourage you to get the pre-approval and the proof of funds prior to even accepting that offer, especially in the strong sellers market when right now you're getting multiple offers, hopefully on your listings. I ran out of water. Well, there's a little bit left. I feel like there's something I need to drink. I need to drink something. Figure this out. So there you have it. Now, this is what I want to share with you, because there are some, because we've seen that there's 2 ways that the seller can cancel the contract. Be aware of this, let them know. And then it goes down here, and it's something that I want to bring out to you in the bold. All right, bringing this out to you in the bold, it says, if you do not remove specified contingencies, buyer, talking to the buyer, and take the specified contractual actions indicated above within 2, or you can put a different number of days in there, after delivery of this notice, the buyer to perform, seller may cancel the agreement. So the cool thing about this document is the fact that if I've got 17 days, let's just start with our 17-day contingency period, right? If I've got 17 days and the buyer has not performed, what day can I send, let me rephrase that question to make sure I don't trip you guys up. If I have a standard contract that is signed, standard contract is signed, haven't changed any of the contingency periods, right? What day can I send a notice to a buyer to perform? Standard contract, we're talking about the inspections and so forth. On what day can I send this document? The earliest time that I can send this document. Who knows the answer to that? 2 days prior. Thank you, Lori. 2 days prior. So if it's on day 15 now, I can prepare this document. Okay. Hey, Rebecca, what's up? I can prepare this document and send it to the other side, stating, hey guys, I want to let you know that I remember and I am aware that you have 17 days to get your inspections done. Today is day 15, so you have 2 more days thereafter to complete those inspections. If not, we can at that point move forward with a cancellation. This really motivates those buyers and those buyers agents who don't know how to get things done in the time frame necessary to get it done. What you are doing, which is a critical piece, especially in this seller's market, is you're putting control back into your seller's hands. Because of course you've relinquished pretty much all control to the buyers. You got to sit back. You know, a home seller called me last week and they're like, is there anything that I can do? I just, you know, they're able to cancel whenever they want to, these buyers, and I've had 2 cancel already. And I just, what can I do? I have any power as the seller? And I was like, not really. You really don't. You give all the power to the buyer until it comes time to them actually performing on the contract or removing their contingencies. And then once you've got a contract moving forward and you want to make sure that this thing happens and you don't sit in escrow for 60, 90 days, you know, because you got a buyer who's trying to get together. Literally, I just closed one recently. We were in escrow for, I don't know, 75 days or something crazy like that. It was insane. Right? To try to avoid some of those hurdles, we can use these forms that have been supplied for us. You can send this again on the 15th day. Day 15 is day 0. So remember that because it says 2 days. So it's for them to give them day 16 and they have to perform by the end of the business day for day 17. All right. They've got to perform. Does that make sense? And then all you got to do is get your sellers to just go ahead and sign that bad boy. You send it on over and you get a confirmation of receipt. If they don't sign it, you have your records of your email that you sent it, because at that point, now your seller has an option to move forward with another buyer. This is not a terribly complicated form, but I do want to make sure that we are aware of it, because if you're on the receiving end, I want to make sure that you're also able to explain this to your clients. So your buyers get this, they're like, whoa, what does this mean? Well, guys, I told you that we had to have that home inspection done at this time. I told you that we needed the appraisal done by this date. It's not done, and the seller's telling us that if we don't get it done in these next 2 days, that they're going to cancel on us. If you're going to utilize a document like this, I would recommend that you don't wait till the 17th day. All right? I would just go ahead, if you're going to utilize it, go ahead and use it in its full capacity. Send it on the 15th day. You know, if you've got a great TC, maybe your TC is sending these on the 15th day, the 19th day. Say, hey guys, let's get this thing moving. I don't know if she's shaking her head. She taught a class just the other week. Make sure that your TC is doing their job as well.
I'm going to tell you right now that I could honestly say that a majority of the agents that try to use the notice to perform, they're not actually ready for a cancellation. So it's like I'm barking, but I have no bite. I will suggest a notice to perform sometimes, but I tell the agents, you got to be ready and willing to cancel. Are you willing to move on? Because if you're not, then what does that mean to the other side?
Right.
if I'm going to issue a notice to perform to the list or the buyer's agent saying, hey, get your EMD in, or I need you to release contingencies, because if not, I can technically cancel. Well, if we go past the 2 days, what happens? What
Null
typically
and void.
happens? I can tell you what happens. Nothing.
That
Nothing
null and void
happens.
the notice to perform.
You gave them a notice to perform, but they're not performing. So if you gave me a notice to perform and I still didn't release contingencies, what happens? What are you going to do as the listing agent?
It's pretty much null and void that notice to perform because you didn't satisfy the 2 days. So I mean, it really is it's not good. It doesn't hold any weight.
If you're not willing to act, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is, if I tell my agent, hey, they haven't released, we've asked and asked and asked, what are you going to do? Oh, let's give them a notice to perform. 2 days, 2 days pass, right? So my 2 days have gone. I'm now on day 4. Okay. They haven't performed. So seller can now cancel. But the agent, the listing agent's like, let's just give them another day. So let's say we go another day, right? Which I'm telling you happens all the time. If they still don't perform, I don't have to issue another notice to perform because this is already in effect, right? I could cancel at any point now, whether it's 3rd day, 4th day, or 5th day from the day of delivery. Is that true or false?
True. You can cancel.
Okay. Does my seller have to get a cancellation signed?
No.
Okay, so notice to perform gets issued. I have one that's in effect right now. And tomorrow, Friday, will be day 3 because that's what the agent allowed, buyer's agent. Okay, so end of business, I'm assuming end of business on day 3. If the buyer does not perform, then we just cancel escrow.
And so we're going to get into that, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
But again, because there's 2 things, and when we get to the cancellation of the contract later in today's training, there's the cancellation of a contract, and then there's cancellation of escrow. We've got 2 different things that we're talking about right there. So very good. But Rebecca brings up good points. If you're going to use these documents, you got to be willing to move forward with them. All right, don't be the little dog that's barking. You know, that's not going to do anything. You know, you got to have some bite behind it as well. And I mean, right now in our market, honestly speaking, you should be moving forward because you're going to get another buyer. Like, you're going to let your sellers know, like, we're going to get another buyer. Like, we got this one. You probably already have backup offers, right? Because you probably got multiple offers on that property. So don't be afraid to put the power back into the hands of your seller. Everybody gets kind of like, well, I really want this deal to work out. I really don't want to have to start over. But sometimes it may be in the best interest of your client to start over, to move on to another because they can't perform. Because if it drags out for another week, another 2 weeks, or a month, or whatever the case may be, you know, that's lost market time. Your seller's got to continue to pay a mortgage on that property. They're losing money. Okay, so just remember that portion. We're going to scroll right on down because there's not only a buyer's seller to perform, there is a notice to a seller to perform as well. These documents are similar in nature, and maybe you knew that there was 2, maybe you only knew that there was 1, all right? I just saw this note right here, and this is a good point that Lori brought up. It says buyer's agent can respond with extension of contingency. And that's a good point that was brought up there. But again, you're having the communication back and forth so that no one is kind of just sitting. Most oftentimes, agents don't say anything. I do it all the time. If I represent the buyer, I'm not releasing any contingencies unless you ask for them. Like, it just isn't even it's not even on my radar. Like, why would I release my contingencies? I represent the buyer. I'm looking out for their best interest. But as the seller's agent, you're supposed to be looking out for them. Don't let these guys just twiddle around. Their lender might not be able to do the loan anymore, and it's going to take another month. So just protect your clients there. All right. moving back on over to the notice to the seller perform. We've already gone over this on the first form, but you want to make sure that you put in what number it is. You want to make sure that you're filling in or checking the box in the appropriate box that needs to be filled in. You want to make sure that it's dated, again, going back to whatever contract we're talking about here. Don't put in the date for the for this that you created this document, okay? Don't do that. All right, so make sure you put in the right date there. And of course, buyer, seller, and property, as we've already mentioned on our previous document. All right, can you guys see my little red drawings? Are those working? Oh, sweet. All right, on. I learned something new today. Okay, so here we go. Buyer hereby gives seller notice that buyer has not yet received from seller the items checked below. Mercy. This is stating that the seller is not performing. Now, you could just send a cancellation, but the contract actually states that you would do, you could perform one of these, a notice of a seller to perform if they're not giving you the following inspection reports, if they're not sending you a lead disclosure, if they're not sending you the statutory disclosures that are required, the SPQ, the TDS. We got a hand up. Yes.
The AVID.
And I was going right there. Yes, AVID. That's a statutory requirement. It's got to be done.
The number one disclosure that is not given in the 7 days.
Ooh, say that again.
Number one disclosure not given in the 7 days.
Number one disclosure not given in the 7 days is
in the files that I work with.
Mm-hmm. That's our responsibility as the agents representing that seller to get that done. Again, take those when you take the listing, guys. Go in, spend the extra half hour, I don't know, whatever it takes you to fill those out. Talk to one of our team members and figure out how to work Glide. You can do it quite easily from your phone. So make sure that's done as well. Any booklets, you know, there's the earthquake hazard booklets that are out there, needs to be turned over to them. HOA docs. Now, HOA docs is, if you ask me, it's kind of a gray area because theoretically it's supposed to be turned in within the 7 days. However, it takes so long to get it from the HOA that when does this thing really, how do you fight this one? You know, because you're dealing with a third party and you never know what these HOA companies, how quickly they're going to move. But again, it's there for you guys to be able to demand that they send that over to you. I think I've shared this story in the past where we were closing, and the day prior to closing was when we finally got the HOA docs. Literally, like the day before closing. It was like, are these ever going to show up? I mean, my client was totally happy. We knew what was there for the most part, but they never got a chance. So of course we never released our contingencies because we haven't been able to thoroughly review all of the documentation that the seller is supposed to provide for us. So make sure you protect your clients as well. If you're a buyer, not releasing contingencies unless you've received everything from the other side. There's also space on here if there's any insurance claims that they need to note to you, the prelim that needs to be disclosed to you. If there's an RCSD, that is notated as well. You can send this for any of these reasons. The real reason why I want to pay focus on this right here down at the bottom is actually more so used for the replacement property, all right? That's where you're mostly going to use this guy right here for the seller. Hey man, if you're selling contingent, I need you to remove those contingents. I need you to get that property and get out of here. All right, so notate that this is at the bottom of that document, removal of finding a replacement property and then removal of close or replacement property, because we do know that the COP form, there's a couple different spaces on there for them to be able to say, hold contingencies for finding a replacement property and then closing on a replacement property, right? And so that's why this is notated here for you to be able to tell that seller, hey, you need to move on, okay? Same rules apply for this document as well. We've got the 2-day window there, so you can send this out 2 days. The buyer simply signs it, you send it over to the other side. Any questions on these? Not too difficult to understand, hopefully, disclosures.
So I missed the first part of the training, so I'm not sure if you said anything about the 2 days. That cannot get changed to 1 day if it's not changed on the actual contract, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've never seen anyone try to change that to 1 day, but yes, this is all going back to what? There it is. in accordance with the terms and conditions of what document? So this is just a supplement or referring back to a document that's already signed. So this can't change what's already been signed. Okay? Just so everybody's on the same page with that one there. All right? And then once we've gone past those notices to perform, whether it's buyer, whether it's seller, you know, we have the demand to close escrow. Now, I've never actually had to use one of these. I've never had one of these sent to myself. It's not a very often used form that I've seen. Rebecca, I don't know how often, maybe you've seen it quite often.
I've probably had less than a handful of files with the demand to close.
Mm-hmm. Most of the time you don't see this, but if you do, again, we have these trainings so that you're not like, I've never seen this file before. I didn't even know that this existed, right? Now you know that it does exist, right? This is after everyone's maybe removed their contingencies and we cannot seem to close for one reason or another, we can use the demand to close escrow. All right, this is just simply stated like all the other ones. You check the box, never forget your boxes, never forget the date that it's referring back to for the document that it's referencing. And of course, make sure that all of the pertinent information is required to be there is there. And then this one says here, don't forget this line, close of escrow date. So you put in when you were supposed to actually close escrow. You make sure that you put that date here on it as well. So there's two dates on this one, which you typically don't see, the date that you have the agreement and when you were actually supposed to close escrow. All right, that's how you fill out the top portion of this form here. And then you're selling, this is either buyer or seller. So this form here, it's either top or bottom. Okay, so see that there is either top or bottom. Why? Because number one, seller. Number two is buyer. Who's sending it? That's what you want to pay attention to. Don't just get it and then, come on guys. These little small mistakes right here can show how good of an agent we are or are not. So make sure that you fill in the appropriate portion on whichever side you represent. Okay? This document is different from that of a notice to perform. In what way? Well, the fact that you actually given a 3-day window here. You have a 3-day window that you are given for the demand to close escrow. All right. Now, you can also not only do the 3-day, you can give a specified date. Now, this is something that was told to me by my mentor, Paul, and something that I have tried to do a little bit of research on myself as well. I think we may have to call Car Legal to get a little bit more, but to my understanding, if you send a demand to close escrow and you don't close escrow, you cancel the contract. This is not like a notice to perform where you just kind of sit back now and, well, we'll just wait it out. No. It says, note to buyer, if you do not close escrow by the end of the time period specified in the demand to close escrow and seller has fully performed, seller may immediately cancel the agreement. That's it. You're done. You don't wait around for, well, let's just give them a couple more days. This document, when used the way that it has been drawn up, it cancels escrow. That's it. It's over. So just make sure you understand that whenever you're explaining that. Just this is not another time for you to be barking, because when you bark with this document here, it bites if you don't close by itself. Okay? So be aware of how to appropriately use this document, whether you represent buyer or seller. This is not like a notice to perform. All right. This is, you didn't get it done, we're canceling. And then if you want to, that we can do some more training later, we can go back and reference, I believe it's paragraph 14H, where it says that in the purchase agreement, that if the whichever party does not agree, that when you cancel that escrow and then talk about release of deposit, then they're actually in breach of contract because they're agreeing to the terms in the contract that state that they will agree to cancel. All right, and sign over to release of the deposit. Again, that's 14H, I believe is what it is. So you can go back and reference that in regards to talking about the closing of escrow and then the deposit. All right. This form, again, not too difficult to understand as well. It's a simple, you only use half of this form, either buyer or seller sign. But again, our job is to help you know what documents are out there so that when you see them or need to use them, that isn't the first time you've ever seen them. All right. Your TC's got a lot of knowledge. She's seen all of these more than one time before, but you as an agent also need to know how to utilize, how to read, and how to explain these documents. I didn't mention it in our email in regards to this portion right here, but it was imperative that we also mention the cancellation of contract, the release of deposit, and the cancellation of escrow form whenever we use these. Because if I'm going to move forward with a notice to perform, if I'm going to move forward with a demand to close escrow, the document that comes after that is the cancellation of contract or the cancellation of the escrow. So I can't send one document not knowing how to send the appropriate following document and what it looks like, right? So of course, I know he says he does this over and over again. He just keeps circling the same boxes. Why do I circle the same boxes, Rebecca? She's all muted over there, but she knows why I circle.
That's what it pertains to.
As it pertains to, but how often do you miss, how often are these missing?
Oh, all the time. The names are missed all the time. The dates are missed all the time. Boxes are missed all the time. One of the other things too is when your TC reminds you of any of these forms, notice to perform, contingency removals, cancellation of contract, there are so many boxes on there for you guys to pick. It's important that you as the agent are picking what you want. So if you're using a TC or an assistant, it's important that you pick those boxes, read through it, and then send it to your TC if that's the case, and you say, hey, send this out for signature. Or if you're gonna pick the boxes and send it out for signature yourself, and you CC your TC or your assistant, and you say, hey, agent, here's the notice to perform, here's a copy of the cancellation, ready to go, you know, whatever. Because I'm assuming at that point you guys have had some kind of conversation with the other side, letting them know that one of these documents is coming their way. But I see it missed all the time.
Mm-hmm. So be the great agents that you already are, and make sure that you are checking your boxes, you're putting your dates, and all of the buyers, sellers, and property information is there. The cancellation of contract and release of deposit and cancellation of escrow form, better known as the CC, is a two-part form as well. The first portion of this document is the cancellation of the contract. That's it. That's all it is. It's just canceling the contract. And it's canceling the contract based on whatever boxes you've checked. So this paragraph is used to cancel the contract or agreement by buyer and seller, or both by mutual agreement. Its terms apply whether or not both parties agree to disposition of the deposit and cancellation of escrow in paragraph 2 below. All right, we're going to get to that. So you've got some options here: buyer, seller, or buyer and seller cancel for the following reasons. So whoever is representing who, if you already had the conversation and both sides are okay to cancel, then this is the box that you check right here. All right. If it's just one or the other, of course, you check that appropriate box there. Don't send it without one of these boxes checked. Okay. Let's just not do that. It's not
Person who's initiating the cancellation. So whether it's the buyer's agent or the seller, you know, as long as all their notices have been given, the person initiating the cancellation should be signing that top portion. Mm-hmm. I get about half of my cancellations with that top section, no signature, but they're signing the bottom part. They might mark the boxes. It might say because of the, you know, 14B, the inspections or whatever their time period, but a lot of agents miss that first signature line. Mm-hmm. And it will get kicked back.
Because you're not recognizing that this is a two-step process on this contract. It is not like, oh, I always just sign the bottom and I move on. Read the contract, or rather read the document, to see that there is, again, 2 spaces for signatures. Again, whoever's initiating, buyer or seller, signs it here. Now, of course, there's the boxes here. It says, as the first option to have is, of course, as permitted by good faith exercise in paragraph. A lot of times you're talking about the referencing the paragraph for the inspections or so forth that weren't the home. They don't like the home anymore. I've actually seen in here at the other, written down here in this bottom portion right here, change of heart. You know, people cancel for whatever. You can write that in here, right? As long as everybody agrees to it, then you move on. If you are referencing back to your notice to buyer to perform or notice to seller to perform, then there are appropriate boxes that you are to check. You've got B and C, respectively, whether you're talking about buyer in B or seller in C, if it's referencing back to a notice to perform. All right? Then there's always the option for per mutual agreement. And then, of course, let me not forget, I jumped over D, which is other party failed to close after giving the demand to close escrow. So everything is already laid out right here at the beginning. This is only the cancellation of the contract. That is it. Because the second half of this document is the what? Release of deposit. Oh, mercy, my whole line got messed up there. Let me get rid of that. Let's try and draw one more time. All right, we're going to try and draw this one more time, a little slower. It's the release of deposit and cancellation of escrow. Oh, darn it. I can't draw a circle. It's too long. The other ones are a little easier to write. Maybe it'll, nope, it didn't do it. All right, cool. Well, I'll just underline it. All right, we'll just underline it. Come on, guy. Work with me. There we go. Oh, and then it disappeared. Whatever, I've done it like 3 times, right? So everybody sees what we're talking about. All right. Release of deposit and cancellation of escrow. It says this paragraph is used to instruct escrow holder to cancel the escrow for the purchase or sale of other designated transaction for the property, and what to do with the deposit. It has no effect on the cancellation of the contract pursuant to paragraph 1. I'll read that again. It has no effect on the cancellation of contract pursuant to paragraph 1. We just read that. Even if both parties to the agreement do not sign below. All right. This paragraph, nothing to do with this top paragraph up here. All right. And then it goes down. And it's stipulated. Let's actually read this, okay? I'm going to read this little portion. It's a little bit that we just pay extra close attention to this. I know it's 11:31. We got started late, so don't worry. We're going to take another 5 minutes of your time. We'll let you guys get to it. It says release of funds by escrow holder requires mutually signed release instructions from buyer and seller. Judicial decision or arbitration award. A party may be subject to a civil penalty of up to $1,000 for refusal to sign such instructions if no good faith dispute exists as to who is entitled to the deposited funds. Now, Rebecca's done a great job, and she's actually put it into the chat box. We were referencing to that paragraph H, so feel free to make sure that you read that if you haven't seen it. They are agreeing, actually, in paragraph H of the purchase agreement to send the funds back to whomever, okay? If they don't sign this, they're in breach of that contract. So they actually have to sign this. They have to say what's going to happen. You just can't sit there, I'm mad at that buyer, and so I'm just going to hold on to his money. You can't do that, actually. You're actually bound to a contract that you sign. So there's a couple boxes that we can sign, but before we sign any box, before we fill out any boxes, the important pieces need to be filled in. Escrow number, right? And who is the escrow company with? Don't miss any of these key pieces, all right? Don't miss any of these key pieces. Fill these bad boys in. What's the escrow number? Who's the escrow with? You know, escrow number SQ57, you know, America's escrow, whatever it's going to be, put that in there, all right? And then you've got the options here where it says seller authorizes release of buyer's deposit less buyer's fees and costs. So if seller says, hey man, go ahead, take it. There's your first option right there. All right. Box B, buyer authorizes the release of buyer's deposit less seller's fees and cost. All right. Less seller's fees. And then why is that? Because we're checking a box pursuant to the properly executed liquidated damages clause, which states buyer's authorization of release of deposit to the seller is limited to no more than 3% of the purchase price. So going back to the fact that your buyer, even if they came in at 50% down, cash buyer, $1 million piece of property, $500,000 in, they're never going to lose more than 3% of the purchase price of the home. It's contractually bound in liquidated damages clause. Okay. And this is just reiterating that point right there. All right, if they're gonna, hey, you know, whatever, your 3%, take your 3%. What's 3% of $1 million? Is $30,000. Buy, go away. You know, your other $470,000 goes back to your buyer. All right, worst case scenario right there is what we just painted for you. Hopefully you don't find yourself in that situation. If these guys can't seem to figure it out, it says if both buyer and seller acknowledge mutual cancellation of the agreement and escrow, but nonetheless authorize escrow holder to continue to hold the deposit, then of course they're going to check this box right here. This is, they haven't quite figured it out yet who's getting the money. So they're saying cancellation of contract, that's fine, but escrow holder, you still hold on to the money until we can get it figured out who's supposed to get it and how much of it. And then of course we want this to be signed and dated by, you know, all parties is really what this should be signed and dated. But again, if one of the parties says that they're not going to sign it, it's 10 days, I believe. I haven't read it just recently, but I believe there it is. If it's 10 days that after they receive this, and this is in paragraph H, 10 days after they receive this, escrow is legally allowed to return that deposit to whichever party. It's 10 days, and it says that they're in now, of course, they won't. All right, they just we understand that they typically won't do it. And they're going to be like, no, we're not going to do it when everybody signs it. But the contract does say that if the buyer or sends this over to the seller and the seller refuses to sign it after 10 days, that escrow can legally turn that money over to the buyer. All right, that's what it says in paragraph H. You got something you want to say, Rebecca?
So that's in what I just copied and pasted into the chat, paragraph H, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I actually have a file right now. We sent in cancellation and the listing side has not returned it signed by the seller, and they're not saying he's not going to sign it. He just hasn't signed it.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we are probably at 10 days or just over 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that that's being marketed as active,
Yep.
but escrow still has the deposit because nobody's received a fully executed cancellation.
Mm-hmm.
So my agent can reference the contract to escrow?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right there in paragraph H. It says 10 days after escrow holder's notice has been given. All right. If they agreed in the purchase agreement that they would return it within 10 days. All right. And if they don't, they've already agreed to it. So in essence, they actually signed this. Does that make sense, everybody? And it's interesting. You brought up a good point. We'll close with this right here, Rebecca, is the fact that if you get this, when you send this document out right here, again, you've got a canceled contract. So yes, you can market your property as active, you know, pending the cancellation of the escrow, but you can move forward again with that property and being active on the market. All right. So remember that piece as well. If you've got one of these, like, well, what can I do with my property? They haven't signed it yet. Go back active and then just put in the MLS. You're going to say, oh, agents do it all the time. Maybe you've seen it. Pending cancellation of an escrow, we're active. We're out there trying to get new buyers for your property. All right. Any questions on these three documents, or these four, actually, these four different documents that we've covered today? Shoot them. Let me see what you got. It's 11:36. We're slightly
So
over.
one last thing I want to add to this is even if the buyer did not put in EMD yet and they are canceling, we in this office have to have this bottom portion signed. So what I see agents do is they'll put in the escrow information and then it's Rose. And then they'll mark other and they'll put no deposit was made into escrow because my form has to be fully executed.
Right. Great point. That's why that other box is there. Again, you've got to have the whole thing done. You can't do part of it. We like to do things completely, you know, around here at Century 21 Preferred, leaving no box unchecked, leaving no line written on that required a date or a signature or an initial. So guys, continue to crush it as the top agents in the Valley. You got any questions, always reach out to us. We're here to help. I hope you found this training beneficial. And until next time, you guys go out there and